The John Wick films feature some of the most satisfying scenes in modern action cinema. With that in mind, here are the most paused moments in the John Wick franchise. From the inky indication of John's violent past to the shots that are just plain cool, here are the most paused moments in the John Wick franchise. John Wick's back tattoo. What we didn't know was just exactly how this seemingly good-natured guy learned how to beat a dude to death with a book or kill 3 men in a bar fight with a pencil. But we got our first glimpse of his dark side shortly after killing John's beloved dog. Before he set out for the Continental, John got ready for action with a nice shower, revealing that this quiet suburban widower had a full back tattoo that was somehow even more ominous than the box of guns and gold coins. While there are a few notable elements to the tattoo, the most eye-catching one by far is the block lettering across the shoulders, Fortis Fortuna Adiuvat, which is the famous Latin phrase fortune favors the brave. Of course, the entire scene is very shadowy and goes by pretty quickly, so unless you have both a familiarity with Latin phrasing and some good eyesight, you're going to want to pause it to take in the full effect. Once you do, you'll see how accurate it is for the rampage you're about to see. John will have some pretty good luck by going directly at his targets like a wrecking ball, while the guy who picked on an adorable puppy and then spent the rest of the movie running away is going to have some pretty rough time of things, even if it's pretty hard to blame that on luck. I'm thinking I'm back. Thanks to the roles that have defined his career over the past 30 years, Keanu Reeves isn't always thought of as the most emotive actor. You want the goofy spaciness of Ted Theodore Logan or the zen quietude of Neo from The Matrix, he's your guy. John Wick, however, shows us that's not always the case. Sure, John has the same quiet intensity that Reeves has brought to plenty of his other roles, and his understated reactions make a lot of the movie's more comedic moments work. The scene where John has his first face-to-face confrontation with Viggo is one of the most iconic moments of the entire franchise, with that half-growling, half-shouting delivery of, "Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back." It's a moment so cool it was featured in the trailer, and it makes the whole scene incredibly memorable. It also makes it worth pausing for a couple of reasons. For one, we rarely get to see Reeves in a full-on rage, and seeing that here makes it pretty easy to believe those rumors that Wick is actually a supernatural creature capable of terrible things. As for the other, well, considering that this scene builds to Reeves shouting, "You can either hand over your son, or you can die screaming alongside him," you might need to take that pause just to calm down. It's a good scene. Cool guy walk away. The fight scenes of the John Wick movies are often hailed as being some of the best in modern cinema, and justifiably so. As good as they are, though, they're not the only thing about these movies that deserve a little praise, and one of the elements that's often overshadowed is just how beautifully shot these films are. One of our favorites, the shot of John walking away in slow motion from a burning pile of money after he takes on a church that's a front for Viggo Tarasov's criminal operations. The cool guy walk away has a long and proud tradition in action movies, showing up in everything from Iron Man to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and it even inspired a song by The Lonely Island. John's version doesn't involve an explosion, although a burning pile of cash has its own intensity, but it makes up for it in pure style. The slow motion, the shadows falling across Reeves' face, the flames coming up from behind our hero as he descends deeper into his own personal hell. It's all pretty awesome, and well worth hammering that pause button to get your screenshot just right. Puppy pause. The most obvious is that the entire rest of the film is devoted to watching a guy make sure that everyone even remotely involved with being mean to his puppy gets got to a truly cartoonish extreme. More than that is the ending, where his long violent journey, which turns out to be the first step in an even longer and more violent one, brings him to someone else who needs a little help. The scene of John in the veterinary hospital, desperate to do what he can for his own wounds and finding someone else who seems to just be waiting around to die, is an emotional climax that most dramatic films about relationships should be jealous of. Of course, this time around, the someone is a pit bull who's scheduled to be put to sleep, but the emotional connection is there, and the scene where John lets his nameless new best friend out of his cage is worth a pause, if only because it's one of the best shots of the dog that we get in the entire movie. It's not that we needed to confirm that this dog is a good boy, but it's nice to get a look and know for sure. Fine art in the world of John Wick. For a movie that's primarily about Keanu Reeves finding exciting new ways to do a murder, a whole lot of John Wick Chapter 2 takes place in and around museums. In particular, the villainous Santino seems fond of surrounding himself with fine art, which has the nice side effect of providing us with some suitably dramatic shots and giving John Wick even more of its signature style. That's not the only reason for all the art. Next time you're watching, give the pause button a workout and take a close look. If you do, you might be able to figure out a little bit of the symbolism that the films are playing with. Take for instance the scene where John meets up with Santino, agreeing to the favor his marker is demanding. The two of them are seated in front of Giovanni Fattori's La Battaglia di Custoza, an 1880 painting depicting a battle from the Third Italian War of Independence 14 years prior. Despite outnumbering their enemies 120,000 to 80,000, the Italian army was forced to retreat, leaving behind thousands of prisoners. Maybe we're reading too much into it, but Santino parking himself in front of a painting about how overwhelming numbers aren't always going to result in a victory, while sitting next to John Wick, might have some thematic resonance here. The markers are definitely worth a look. The first film really told us only what we needed to know about the shadowy world of assassins and their preferred hotels, but John Wick Chapter 2 kicks that into high gear. We go a whole lot deeper into the meaning of those mysterious gold coins, and we find out that they're not the only elaborate trinkets that assassins are trading with each other. Now we have the markers. We learn about them more in Chapter 3, but here we see that they're essentially a physical representation of a favor owed to someone who did you a solid and expect something in return. While they're small enough to fit in a pocket, they carry a considerable weight. If someone has your marker, you cannot refuse their request, no matter what it is, lest you bring the wrath of the entire assassin world down on your head. The assassins, with their typical penchant for drama, have hidden needles in these medallions so they can formally seal their favors with bloody thumbprint. As it stands, we'll have to make do with pausing the few close-up shots that we get, diving into the details, like the filigreed skull at the center of the marker's design, that just go by too fast on the screen. Knife to meet you. John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum, despite the ever-lengthening and somewhat unwieldy title, is not a movie that wastes a lot of time. 7 minutes into that film, John is beating a gigantic dude to death with a book in the middle of the New York Public Library, and it doesn't really slow down from there. About 15 minutes after that, he's fighting people while riding a horse through Midtown Manhattan. It's a wild ride. The library fight isn't the kind of scene you pause, even if it is one that you'll watch over and over again. The fight scene that follows is one that'll have you hammering on the button to freeze frame it. If only to see how they managed to pull off those effects without actually killing anyone, when a group of assassins corners John in some kind of museum warehouse full of antique knives that someone has kept incredibly sharp. Arguably the worst possible place on the planet that you could corner John Wick, we get some knife throwing that goes past brutal and into hilarious. One poor dude gets pincushioned a full 5 times, which seems a bit excessive. This one demands to be paused for a couple of reasons. John Wick's battle in the Hall of Mirrors. Saying that the John Wick films have some great fight scenes is understating things quite a bit. These movies are essentially about 6 hours of crazy battles interspersed with people loving dogs and hating other people. If you're looking for the true visual highlights, though, they don't get a whole lot better than the Hall of Mirrors fight in John Wick Chapter 2. We're not sure why Santino even has a Hall of Mirrors in which to have a prolonged gunfight, but since the prevailing concern for the Wickiverse's interior designers seems to be how cool would it be to get stabbed in here, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that we get some of the best visuals in the series, from the battle between John and the bodyguard played by Ruby Rose to the kaleidoscopic fights, where John and his opponent are surrounded by infinite reflections of brutal fistfight. Not since the Matrix Revolutions have we been as excited to see Keanu Reeves duking it out with infinite identical opponents, and let's be real, this one's better. The entire sequence is about 7 minutes of pure adrenaline, and virtually every shot is worth pausing to take it all in. Who says gratuitous violence can't be absolutely beautiful? Punching the ticket and pressing pause. Our first glimpse of John's tattoo in the first film requires pressing pause to get a good look at it. The scene in Parabellum that finds John arriving at the Tarkovsky Theater in hopes of escaping the bounty on his head demands the same. For one thing, there's the ballerina that we see as John arrives, who has a similar tattoo, right down to the Latin across her shoulders, proving that while he might be the most unstoppable graduate from the director's training program, the trip backstage is also full of world building that goes by just a little too quickly for obsessive fans, the other ballerinas suffering for their art, the group practicing jujitsu, and even the paintings lining the director's cozy study are all crying out for more attention. The big one is the golden rosary that John hands over, a ticket being taken by the director that's then used to brand him with an inverted cross, right on his tattoo. Of all the moments that show us the secret societies in John Wick, this is the one that feels the most insular. Everyone involved knows exactly what's going on, what's being demanded, and what the price will be. As much as we like digging through the background for details, this is one that we like to slow down just so that we can try piecing it all together. Giving the finger. John's meeting with the Elder, a mysterious assassin king who lives in the desert outside Casablanca while dreaming up elaborate displays of fealty, doesn't exactly go well. Sure, John gets what he wants, his excommunicado status eliminated, but that only lasts for about 20 minutes before he's back on the high table's bad side. And he also has to pay a pretty significant price. If you've seen the movie, you absolutely remember this scene. It's somehow way more memorable than when he uses a horse as a murder weapon, and that's saying something. If you haven't seen it, well, let's just say that John takes off his wedding ring, the hard way. Even by the standards of violence that we've already seen in these movies, it's both intense and unexpected, partly because it's John doing something to himself rather than to someone else. It turns out that the only person in these movies who can really take on John Wick is John Wick. So whether it's your first time watching Chapter 3 or your 40th, you're probably going to want to take a quick break right before it happens and take a deep breath. Maybe get yourself a glass of water, and mentally prepare. Just have that button ready for when John slides his hand across that tablet with a chisel on it. You'll thank us later. Thanks for watching. Let us know what is your favorite pause scene in John Wick franchise. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button.